"You're not a team player," Gregory said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. "Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else." I sat across from him in his corner office, watching as he delivered what he clearly thought was a devastating blow. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant chatter of my colleagues in the hallway, completely unaware that their department head was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. "I understand," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Should I clean out my desk now?" Gregory's eyebrows shot up slightly. He had expected tears, maybe pleading, certainly not this composed response. "Yes, I think that would be best. Human Resources will contact you about your final paperwork." I nodded and stood up, smoothing down my navy blazer. "Of course. Thank you for the opportunity to work here, Gregory." As I walked toward the door, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. He was probably wondering why I wasn't begging for my job, why I wasn't promising to be more of a team player, if he'd just give me another chance. What Gregory didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. My name is Vanessa Kim, and until 15 minutes ago, I was the senior marketing analyst at North Peak Engineering in Portland, Oregon. At 34, I had worked my way up from an entry-level position to leading the highest-performing team in our department. My campaigns had generated over $2 million in new business this year alone, and my team consistently exceeded every quarterly target. None of that mattered to Gregory anymore, though. Not since I had politely declined his third dinner invitation in as many weeks. I walked through the open office space where my team sat, their heads buried in their monitors, completely focused on the product launch campaign we had been working on for months. Jessica looked up from her computer as I passed her desk. "Hey, Vanessa, are we still on for the client presentation tomorrow?" she asked, her bright smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Actually, you'll need to coordinate with Gregory on that," I said softly. "I won't be here tomorrow." The confusion in her eyes was heartbreaking. My team trusted me, relied on me, and now they would be left to deal with the fallout of Gregory's decision. But there was nothing I could do about that now, except ensure that this never happened to anyone else. 6 months earlier, I had been thrilled to join North Peak Engineering. The company had a stellar reputation in the construction industry, designing everything from residential complexes to massive infrastructure projects. As someone who had always been passionate about marketing in the engineering sector, it felt like the perfect fit. Gregory had seemed professional during my interview process. He was 42, married with 2 teenage daughters, and had been with the company for 8 years. He spoke enthusiastically about the department's goals and seemed genuinely impressed with my background in technical marketing. I felt optimistic about working under his leadership. The first few months were everything I had hoped for. My team and I developed a comprehensive digital marketing strategy that increased lead generation by 35%. I implemented new tracking systems that gave us unprecedented insight into our target demographics. Gregory praised my work publicly and even recommended me for a company-wide innovation award. But somewhere around month 4, things began to shift. It started subtly. Gregory would linger by my desk a little too long when discussing projects. He began asking about my weekend plans and commenting on my appearance. "You look nice today, Vanessa," became a regular greeting, always delivered with a smile that made my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off initially. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent comments. I had dealt with overly familiar bosses before, and I knew how to maintain professional boundaries without creating workplace drama. The first dinner invitation came on a Friday afternoon in month 5. Gregory appeared at my desk just as I was packing up for the weekend. "Great work on the Morrison account presentation," he said, perching on the edge of my desk. "How about we celebrate with dinner tonight? I know a great Italian place downtown." I kept my response light, but firm. "That's very kind, but I have plans tonight. Thank you, though." His smile flickered for just a moment, before returning full force. Of course. Maybe another time. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The invitations became more frequent, always framed as work-related celebrations or team-building opportunities. When I declined, Gregory's demeanor would shift slightly. He became more critical of my work, questioning decisions that he had previously praised. He started scheduling last-minute meetings that ran late, then suggesting we continue the conversation over dinner. My performance reviews remained stellar, but I could sense the change in our dynamic. Gregory was no longer seeing me as a valuable team member. He was seeing me as a challenge to overcome. The professional respect I had worked so hard to earn was evaporating, replaced by something that made me deeply uncomfortable. By month 6, I knew I needed to protect myself. That's when I started recording our conversations. The recording app on my phone became my lifeline. Every interaction with Gregory was documented, time-stamped, and stored securely in the cloud. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I would probably never need the recordings, but my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with the situation. The breakthrough moment came 3 weeks ago during our quarterly performance review. Gregory had called me into his office to discuss my annual evaluation, which should have been a straightforward conversation about my achievements and goals for the following year. "Your numbers are impressive as always," Gregory said, scrolling through the report on his computer screen. "The team really responds well to your leadership style." "Thank you," I replied, relaxing slightly. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe we could get back to a normal working relationship. "In fact," Gregory continued, turning to face me with that familiar smile, "I think it's time we discussed your future here. There might be a promotion opportunity coming up in the next quarter." My heart skipped with excitement. A promotion would mean more responsibility, better pay, and validation of all the hard work I had put into building my career. "That sounds wonderful. What would the role entail?" Gregory leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. "Well, that depends on how committed you are to being part of the leadership team. It requires a lot of collaboration, relationship building, sometimes working closely together outside of normal office hours." The way he emphasized "closely together" sent a chill down my spine. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. "Of course," I said carefully, "I'm always willing to put in extra effort for important projects." "Excellent." Gregory's smile widened. "Why don't we start with dinner this Friday? We can discuss the details of the position, maybe talk about your long-term career goals." "I'm thinking somewhere nice. Maybe that French restaurant on Northwest 23rd Avenue. There it was, the quid pro quo that I had been dreading. A promotion dangled like a carrot, contingent on my willingness to blur the lines between professional and personal relationships. "I appreciate the consideration," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But I prefer to keep business discussions in the office. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week to go over the details." Gregory's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "Vanessa, successful people in this industry understand that relationships matter. Networking, building trust, showing that you're committed to the team. These things don't happen in conference rooms." "I understand," I replied, "but I'm not comfortable with dinner meetings. I hope you can respect that boundary." The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. Gregory's jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all warmth. "I see. Well, I suppose we'll have to reassess your fit for leadership roles here." That was the moment I knew my job was in jeopardy. The retaliation began almost immediately. Gregory started excluding me from high-level meetings that I had always attended. Important emails that should have been copied to me mysteriously went to other team members instead. Projects that had been mine for months were suddenly reassigned without explanation. My team noticed the changes, though they didn't understand the cause. Jessica approached me one afternoon, her brow furrowed with concern. "Vanessa, is everything okay? Gregory said he's taking over the Henderson Industries presentation next week. I thought that was your project." I forced a smile, not wanting to drag my team into the toxic situation. "Just some reshuffling of responsibilities, nothing to worry about." But privately, I was documenting everything. Every slight, every reassignment, every passive-aggressive comment was recorded and cataloged. I also began researching employment law, spending my evenings reading about hostile work environments and retaliation cases. The second dinner invitation came 2 weeks later, right after I had successfully closed a major deal with a new client. Gregory summoned me to his office, ostensibly to congratulate me on the win. "Outstanding work on the Cascade construction contract," he said, though his tone lacked genuine enthusiasm. "That's exactly the kind of initiative that makes someone promotion material." Here we go again, I thought, discreetly pressing the record button on my phone app. "Thank you," I replied. "The team put in a lot of excellent work on that proposal." "They did, but leadership comes from the top. Speaking of which, I think it's time we had that dinner conversation about your future here. How about tomorrow night?" I had practiced this response in my head dozens of times. "I appreciate your interest in my career development, Gregory, but as I mentioned before, I prefer to keep business discussions in the office. Perhaps we could schedule a formal meeting with human resources present to discuss advancement opportunities." The suggestion of involving human resources was deliberate. I wanted to see how he would react to the prospect of outside oversight. Gregory's mask slipped completely. His face flushed red, and his voice turned cold. "Vanessa, I'm beginning to think you don't understand how things work here. This company values team players, people who are willing to go the extra mile to build relationships. If you're not interested in being part of that culture, maybe you should reconsider your career path." "I'm very committed to my career," I said firmly. "I just believe in maintaining professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries," Gregory repeated, his tone mocking. "That's an interesting way to describe being uncooperative." The conversation ended there, but I could see the wheels turning in Gregory's head. He was done with subtlety. The gloves were about to come off. Over the next week, my work environment became increasingly hostile. Gregory began micromanaging every aspect of my job, demanding detailed reports on tasks that had never required oversight before. He criticized presentations that had previously earned praise, finding fault with formatting and word choices that he had approved just days earlier. The most damaging incident occurred during a client meeting with Portland Metro Development. I had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive marketing strategy for their upcoming housing project, but when we sat down with their executive team, Gregory undermined me at every turn. "What Vanessa is proposing is certainly creative," he said, with a patronizing smile. "But I think we need to take a more conservative approach. Let me walk you through some alternative strategies." He proceeded to present a watered-down version of my original proposal, taking credit for the research and insights I had developed. The clients looked confused by the mixed messaging, and I could see our credibility slipping away in real time. After the meeting, I confronted Gregory privately. What just happened in there was unprofessional and damaging to our client relationship. Gregory's response was ice cold. What happened in there was leadership. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about boundaries and more time being a team player, you'd understand the difference. That night, I called my attorney. Margaret Chen? No, I caught myself before thinking her name. My attorney's name was Margaret Thompson, and she specialized in employment law. I had found her through a referral from a former colleague who had dealt with a similar situation at her previous job. When I called her office, her secretary scheduled an appointment for the following day. Margaret's office was in downtown Portland, occupying the 15th floor of a sleek glass building. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. After I explained my situation and played several of the most damning recordings, she leaned back in her chair and nodded grimly. You've done exactly the right thing by documenting everything, she said. These recordings clearly establish a pattern of harassment and retaliation. The fact that he's tying your job security to personal dinner invitations is textbook quid pro quo harassment. What are my options? I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. We have several paths forward, Margaret explained. You could file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, pursue internal resolution through your company's Human Resources Department, or prepare for potential litigation if the situation escalates further. What would you recommend? Margaret considered this carefully. Given that your supervisor has already begun retaliating against you professionally, I suspect this situation will continue to deteriorate. I'd recommend preparing for all possibilities while trying to protect your current position as long as possible. She was right, of course. When I returned to work the next day, the tension was palpable. Gregory barely acknowledged my presence during our morning department meeting, and when he did address me directly, his tone was dismissive and cold. The third dinner invitation came exactly 1 week later, and it would prove to be the final straw. I was working late, trying to catch up on projects that Gregory had unnecessarily complicated with his new micromanagement requirements. The office was nearly empty, with just a few dedicated employees scattered throughout the floor. When Gregory appeared at my desk at 7 p.m., I knew immediately what was coming. "Still here, Vanessa? That's dedication," he said, though his tone suggested he found my work ethic more annoying than admirable. "Just finishing up the quarterly reports," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "You know, this reminds me, we still haven't had that dinner conversation about your future here. Third time's the charm, right? How about we head out now and grab something at that steakhouse on Burnside?" This time I looked up and met his gaze directly. "Gregory, I've made it clear that I'm not interested in dinner meetings. I'd prefer to discuss my career development through official channels." His friendly facade cracked completely. "Official channels," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea how this industry actually works? Do you think successful people get ahead by hiding behind policies and procedures?" "I think successful people get ahead through competence and hard work," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. Gregory leaned down, placing his hands on my desk and bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Let me be very clear, Vanessa. Your attitude problem is affecting your team's morale and this department's productivity. If you can't adjust your approach to collaboration, you might find that your skills aren't as valuable here as you think they are." The threat was unmistakable, and I had it all on recording. "I understand," I said quietly. But what Gregory didn't understand was that he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. The final confrontation happened on a Friday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after my meeting with Margaret Thompson. I had spent those weeks meticulously documenting every interaction, every slight, every professional setback that could be traced back to my refusal to have dinner with Gregory. My team's morale was suffering under his increasingly erratic management style. He had begun questioning their work as well, apparently trying to build a case that my leadership was somehow infecting the entire department with attitude problems. Jessica had confided in me that she was considering looking for another job, and 2 other team members had expressed similar concerns. The breaking point came when Gregory announced that he was reassigning the Morrison Industries account, my biggest client and most successful ongoing project, to a junior analyst who had been with the company for less than 6 months. "I think Kevin could benefit from the exposure to high-level client management," Gregory announced during our team meeting, as if this decision made perfect sense. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that the Morrison account was complex and required deep knowledge of their industry and specific needs. Reassigning it to Kevin wasn't just arbitrary. It was potentially damaging to the client relationship and the company's reputation. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with Gregory. We went to his office and I closed the door behind us, making sure my phone was recording. "Gregory, I need to understand the reasoning behind reassigning the Morrison account," I began. "That client relationship has taken months to develop, and they specifically requested to continue working with me." Gregory didn't even pretend to have a legitimate business justification. Vanessa, I've been very patient with your attitude, but I'm starting to question whether you're really committed to being part of this team. Mo, what specifically about my attitude concerns you? I asked, keeping my voice professional. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your unwillingness to engage in the kind of relationship building that's essential in this business. Your insistence on maintaining unnecessary barriers between yourself and leadership. There it was. The clearest statement yet that my job performance was being judged based on my refusal to socialize with him outside of work. Are you saying that my professional relationships should extend beyond office hours? I asked, wanting to get his answer on record. I'm saying that people who want to advance in this company need to show that they're willing to invest in building trust and rapport with their supervisors. If you can't do that, then maybe this isn't the right environment for you. The ultimatum was finally out in the open. Submit to his inappropriate advances disguised as networking, or face continued retaliation that would eventually force me out. I see, I said calmly. And if I continue to decline dinner invitations, you'll continue to reassign my projects and undermine my position here? Gregory's face reddened. I'm not undermining anything. I'm trying to manage a department, and that requires team members who are willing to be team players. If you can't understand that basic concept, then yes, you might be happier somewhere else. Understood, I replied. In that case, I'll need to think about whether this is the right fit for me. Take all the time you need, Gregory said with a cold smile. But don't take too long. There are plenty of people who would be grateful for the opportunities you're throwing away. I left his office knowing that the end was near. Gregory had painted himself into a corner, and his next move was entirely predictable. I called Margaret Thompson and told her to prepare the paperwork. The termination notice came the following Monday morning. You're not a team player, Gregory said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else. I smiled as I packed my personal items into the cardboard box that Human Resources had provided. My coffee mug, the small succulent plant that had brightened my desk, the framed photo of my graduation from business school, all of it went into the box with careful precision. Should I expect my final paycheck to include severance? I asked conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. Gregory shrugged. That's between you and Human Resources. I'm sure they'll be in touch. I stood up, box in hand, and looked around the office one last time. My team was watching from their desks, confusion and concern written across their faces. Jessica looked like she might cry. Well, it's been educational, I said to Gregory, extending my hand for a final handshake. He hesitated for a moment before accepting it, probably wondering why I wasn't more upset. Good luck, Vanessa. Thank you, I replied. I have a feeling I won't need it. As I walked through the office toward the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to Margaret Thompson. It's done. He terminated me today at 2:30 p.m., exactly as we predicted. Her response came back immediately. Perfect. I'll file the complaint first thing Monday morning. Are you ready for this? I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. More than ready. What Gregory didn't know was that I had 47 recordings of our interactions over the past 4 months. What he didn't know was that I had documented every instance of retaliation, every professional slight, every inappropriate comment. What he didn't know was that Margaret Thompson had already prepared a comprehensive complaint that would be filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries simultaneously. Most importantly, what Gregory didn't know was that I had spent the past month quietly building relationships with former employees who had left the company under mysterious circumstances. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out into the Portland afternoon with a sense of anticipation that I hadn't felt in months. Monday morning arrived with a fury that Gregory never saw coming. I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown when my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. The first few went to voicemail, but by the 5th call, I decided to answer. Vanessa, this is Todd Williams from Human Resources at North Peak. We need to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss your departure from the company. I took a sip of my latte and smiled. I'm afraid I'm not available for meetings this week. My attorney has advised me to direct all communications through her office. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Your attorney? Margaret Thompson at Thompson & Associates. I believe you'll be hearing from her shortly if you haven't already. I hung up and checked my email. Margaret had sent me a copy of the formal complaint she had filed that morning. 37 pages of detailed allegations, supported by time-stamped recordings and documentation that painted a clear picture of sexual harassment and retaliation. The complaint had also been forwarded to local employment rights organizations and legal advocacy groups. By noon, 3 different reporters had reached out requesting interviews about workplace harassment in the engineering industry. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Kevin from your old team. Gregory called an emergency meeting this morning and canceled all client meetings for the week. What's going on? I didn't respond, but I smiled knowing that the chaos was just beginning. By Tuesday, the story had been picked up by the Portland Business Journal. By Wednesday, it was trending on social media under the hashtag #NorthPeak harassment. Gregory had made one fatal error in his calculations. He assumed I would disappear quietly. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he had been. Margaret called me Thursday afternoon with an update that made my day complete. Vanessa, I just got off the phone with NorthPeak's legal team. They want to discuss a settlement. The tables had finally turned. As I reflected on the journey from victim to victor, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply the quiet satisfaction of watching someone face the consequences of their own choices. Gregory had taught me that documentation and patience are the most powerful weapons against workplace predators, and I would carry that lesson forward into whatever came next.